Welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And today I have the pleasure of the company of Claire Lilla. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
So now I thought it might be nice to have someone come on and talk about, I guess, divination. And so what is divination?
I would say divination is opening yourself as much as possible in the moment to whatever wants to reveal itself to you in that moment. And in that way, you're obviously aligning with the principle of synchronicity, that everything in this moment has significance and that whatever reveals itself to you is something that you need to see, or that you're ready to see. Now that might be something that serves just you. You might be asking a question, and what reveals itself in that moment is your self-insight. And it may be that you're acting on behalf of someone else and someone else's question. And in that way, it's a divinatory service to someone else, that you're giving them the ability to see something that they need to see at that moment in their life. So, yeah.
So what we're saying then is that divination is opening up a line of communication between ourselves and a greater power. And yes, it can come through signs. It could come through meeting the right person at the right time. So if then divination is the means by which we open communication, synchronicity, being in the right place at the right time to receive that omen, that sign, that communication from somebody who happens to come along and just answers your question, then synchronicity is the message. And it comes in different packages. Sorry, the means by which the message is arrives. It's the delivery system. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Okay, yes. So, and we know synchronicity exists because we all have experience of it. It's a bit like magnetism. We can't see it, but we know it's there because we all have these experiences, whether it's we're thinking something, we turn on the radio and there's a song that is expressing what we're feeling or thinking, or whether it's a moment in which you're thinking about your Auntie Jane and you open a book and a picture of her falls out. Whatever it is, we've all got these experiences and we call them rather dismissively coincidences. And so what we're saying is, no, stop there. That's something speaking to you. Even if it's just mirroring back, maybe there's something there that you need to explore a little bit within yourself. Even if that's all it is, then there's something there to explore. But now there's more, because we can actually cultivate divination or the ability to seek synchronicity. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there, as you said, there are obviously different means by which messages can come in, and there may be certain let's say threads that you might resonate more with, that you might pull on a bit more, that that might call to you more. So astrology is obviously one way in which we can track synchronicity and work with it and look at it. But if we're looking for something which can give us immediate mirroring back, the tarot is an amazing tool for that. I think specifically because it works in images and there's something free, even just the fact that the cards are free and loose and you can be working with them and one just jumps out at you. There's something about that which is not under our control. And yet it's always at our disposal if you have a tarot set that you work with. And those images, you know, it's similar in a way to working with dreams. And if you're cultivating that relationship with your dreams, then you can hold on to the images more as you awaken, and you can continue to unfold those images. But for a lot of people who are starting out with these divinatory arts, they can't always hold on to dream imagery, and it may be that they're not so awake to things that are unfolding in everyday life. The tarot gives you that very focused, tangible tool that you can go to, that you can seek and ask to be shown something, and that principle of synchronicity will work through the cards.
So different people have different experiences with tarot. And my experience of tarot, which I have to say is extremely limited, is that it's actually very frightening. Because however apt it might be, it's so dramatic, and the symbolism is like, oh my God, should I just jump off a building now, please? It's really very frightening some of the time. And I think there must be a way in which we move. There must be something I'm missing. I know that there's something I'm missing, because I think what happens, and maybe this happens to lots of people, is we get the card that would be perhaps the diagnostic card that says, hey, here's the problem, right? We have to find a way of having that narrative have a happy ending. Am I right?
Well, we certainly are hoping for a happy ending. I think ending is possibly the wrong word anyway, because whatever card comes to you, it's part of an unfolding present, you know, and our relationship with the cards will shift from day to day, from week to week, year to year. So, you know, if you pull a very dramatic card one day, and maybe you work with it for a whole year, for example, and it does unfold in many ways that are dramatic over that year, it doesn't mean that just because you have certain experiences that are reflected by that card, that that's the end. You know, the end is a beginning. Beginning is an end. So it's, yes, just in terms of the drama that you're talking about with the cards, of course, there are some very dramatic imagery and dramatic archetypes, like the archetype of death, the archetype of, you know, the tower collapsing, the archetype of the devil who seems to be controlling everything. Some of the language perhaps is a bit antiquated. If you think the cards as we know them now were developed in the mid-15th century, so some of the language feels quite too, almost a little bit religious in a way. But if you just put the language to the side and you just think about what the energies are running through the cards, a bit like working with some of the planetary energies in astrology, yes, there is the potential for them to bring conflict, suffering, pain, you know, that's life. But at the same time, the very same cards could have the possibility of awakening you, you know, opening your life to some amazing blessings to come in. So it's basically understanding that every archetype has different faces, a dark face, a light face, different levels of meaning. Actually building a relationship with the tarot demystifies all of that, and it also means that you lose your fear. You don't have this sense of like one card suddenly sort of breaking its way into your life and bringing all this strange energy with it. It demystifies and just reminds you that everything in life is actually there to take you closer to your soul fulfillment, you know, to actually align you with your soul purpose.
And this is true of all the divination arts, because, you know, the archetype language of astrology is pretty dramatic in its own right. It always is, because mythology is dramatic, just like our dreams are very dramatic. a lot of the time. And I think that, you know, there are certain aspects of astrology which, and I'm thinking particularly of some of the so-called malefic fixed stars, where I think, I don't want to go there. You know, particularly in my chart, where I have the sun very close to Algol, which is associated with decapitation. This is, you know, not a happy ending. So we have to understand that we can't take that literally, but that there are issues around certain things that need to be explored, etc. So there's always there's obviously a level of discomfort. And you were talking about language, an archaic language, and we have that in astrology as well, where in the more traditional practice of astrology, it's much more fatalistic. And because it's much more fatalistic, it can be very alarming. Whereas a modern interpretation, which would be a more psychological interpretation, perhaps, which would be a more psychological interpretation, perhaps, would bring a very different picture and understanding. So that would be the case. Now, did you say 15th century is where tarot developed?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question because many people would claim, and I don't dispute this, would claim that the tarot goes back thousands of years and that the images themselves may well be rooted in initiatory rites of ancient Egypt, that they obviously have close links with Jewish secret knowledge, you know, that was obviously then sort of passed on to the Kabbalah as it was known in later years. So yes, there are questions around how far back these cards go, and as a system, as a map of the human psyche and human experience. But in terms of actually having a tangible deck that we can trace, that goes back to the mid-15th century and the Renaissance.
Yes, because it surprised me that it was as late as that.
Yes.
Because those symbols are old. They are very old. Yeah. They're very ancient. Those archetypal symbols have been around for forever, it seems, and you find them all through mythology, etc. Those characters are all there. That's why I was surprised, but it's the actual way in which they are packaged in the deck.
Yeah, and actually having a tangible deck, because if you think before the Renaissance, there would have been secret societies, there would have been people keeping this knowledge away from the clutches of the Catholic Church, which would not want people to have direct revelation. They would not want people to feel empowered. So there would have been people preserving this kind of knowledge. Whatever the format was, we don't necessarily know. But of course, things don't just suddenly pop out of nowhere. You know, the cards have emerged in a visible form in the mid-15th century. But as you've just said, the archetypes are as old as human consciousness. You know, the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell plotted, that goes through every single myth, every single story that means something, that resonates with the human condition. The major Arcana cards plot that hero's journey. And if you see it in that way, then it actually helps us to understand ourselves much better. And it connects also to every culture. You know, it goes beyond language barriers, it goes beyond cultural barriers.
And funnily enough, I think that's what I was getting at when I was talking about a happy ending kind of thing, because I think the problem is that if you take one card, it's one card out of context. And I need more. I need the story. And I need to know where this is going, and you know, and the potential for how it's going to pan out, which is what I always have. using astrology, of course. So that's I think the bit that I would be looking to learn more about. So speaking of learning more about, you are now teaching this beautiful old art. So tell us about what you're doing with it.
So I've begun a process of offering tarot apprenticeship. So rather than just teaching about the cards and helping people to understand the imagery and understand the way in which the cards function, which is, you know, you can get that from books, you can look things up. I want people to feel that they can embody something much deeper through a process of having that mentorship, having that guidance, and being also given the connections with other divinatory arts like astrology, like seership, working with oracular abilities and working with dreams, through those different practices to actually be able to take all of that in the crucible of oneself and really be a transformative force, if you like, in the world, you know, to transform yourself, but also to facilitate transformation. And that goes beyond intellectual study.
What do you mean by embody?
By embody, I'll give you an example. So when I was deepening my own experience of working with the tarot, I decided that what I was going to do was I was going to what I called walk with the archetypes of the major arcana. So over the course of a lunar cycle, which obviously is about 27, 28 days, I walked with each card, so one card a day, and I had some breaks where I could journal and just digest. But over the course of that month, I had 22 days where I was with one archetype, one card each day. And I suppose by sort of bringing that energy in, I then was very aware that I wanted to see what would come and reflect itself back at me, you know, what wanted to show itself to me on that day with that archetype. And through a process of journaling, recording my dreams from that time, you know, that in a way for me is inviting the archetypes to breathe through you, to speak through you, even if it's speaking through you to you at that point and not for you to actually be of service to anyone else at that stage. But embodying for me becomes part of your life, really, rather than just another book on the shelf, you know, another piece of knowledge. It's something that becomes very visceral, very integral, actually, to the way that you approach life.
It's about allowing it to become a part of you. And yes. And here's the thing, it can't not be a part of you, because once you begin to see things through a particular filter, you can't undo it, because you start to see things that you never saw before. It's like the opening of your eyes. And I think what you're describing there then is a twofold process, one of self-discovery and understanding, but then also of interaction with the numinous, the divine, and allowing that to flow more deeply into your life. So to put it very simply, it's a way of developing yourself and your spirituality. I think that would be a very simple way of putting it. Well, this sounds very exciting. So if people would like to learn more, is there somewhere that they can go to? Is there a website, or do they get in touch with you? How do we proceed?
I invite anyone that's interested to email me as the first port of call. And I'll give you my email in a moment. But by emailing me, I'll then start a conversation. I will give more information about how that apprenticeship will unfold, and the vision I have for that apprenticeship with whatever they decide, you know, that, or at least how they want to begin that journey with me. So we can begin that conversation. So my email, so shall I say my email?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's clairegaia@icloud.com. So,
and I'll be sure to put that in the description box, that link. Now, are you looking for people who already know about tarot, or does it, you know, are you open to having beginners?
Beginners, all those with previous knowledge, everyone's welcome, because it's not so much about knowledge, it's more about the calling, you know, that feeling inside that something's resonating with you. That's the important part of it. So even if, you know, you've never even seen a tarot pack, or you've been working with it for 10 years, but you feel like there's some piece that's not quite clicked in, or something deeper that needs to unfold, that needs to open up for you, then please get in touch.
Yes, I was just one little footnote, because I was thinking about what you said about pictures, and I think there's another aspect of tarot which I think is very interesting, is the fact that it is pictorial. So with astrology, we have the stories, and although astrology is potentially a very right brain activity, it can also be very left brain. You can't say that about tarot. Because it is pictorial, it goes straight to the subconscious, and it speaks of what's there very, very graphically. So I think that it's a fascinating way to work. I just thought that was just an additional thought there.
It's very similar to dream work, in the sense that the material you're working with, as you've said, it's a vision, you know, it's an image, and images speak on so many different levels, and, you know, there's so much you can do to work with them in a more conscious way. So in that way, I would say it sparks from that right brain side, but in a way it brings both hemispheres into unity, because analysis can then go to work on it. You know, it's a beautiful form to work with for that reason.
Well, in that case, the quest for beauty alone is worth getting people to email you, and I'll make sure that, as I say, that link is on the description box. Claire, thank you so much for joining us on In the Light today.
Thank you, Anna. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from people.
Thank you all for watching, and next time we're going to be talking to Shelley Knight about her book Good Grief. Do feel free to make comments and ask questions. I always read them, always reply, and if you haven't already, do subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.